You've probably heard this Robert Evans quote before. There are 3 sides to every story: your side, my side, and the truth. Hashtag I'm 12 and this is deep. But the quote is very applicable to life, but also to business, because people perceive what happens to them very differently, and also the reason people tell their sides of the story are for very different objectives. And because the internet's super reactionary, people often believe the first story told, even if it's not the right story. I am not someone who is unique to falling for this problem. I am sometimes way too reactionary, and when I try to wait, I still fail. Like with the Bayonetta voice actor story I talked about a few weeks ago, where she said she was offered $4,000 to return to her role as Bayonetta. That was a lie. She was offered $15,000, which you could argue is still not enough, but that doesn't matter. When you lie about the facts originally, it's a lot harder to be on your side. And today we are talking about another story where 3 years ago, the first side of the story that came out was believed, and only this past week are we finding out the other side of the story and perhaps the truth. Of course, I'm talking about Mick Gordon, the composer for Doom Eternal. If you don't know Doom Eternal, one of the greatest games that's come out in the past decade, and probably one of the greatest franchises ever in video gaming history. It got super high ratings, and Mick Gordon, the composer for it, was nominated for awards and won awards for Best Soundtrack. You've probably heard the soundtrack, even if you've never played Doom Eternal, because you probably browse TikTok. And then there's like the high-pitched voice, and it goes, "Hoya!" Yeah, anyway, that's Mick. Mick makes good music. You've probably heard Mick's music, and he worked with a company called id Software. Let's do a little bit of background on them. They are a game company who create games like Doom and Quake and Rage. A lot of the classics, a lot of the hits. And they are owned by ZeniMax Media, which is owned by Xbox Game Studios, and they also ZeniMax Media owns Bethesda. So a lot of parents in this company, a lot of subsidiaries, but all you need to know is id Software makes Doom, makes Quake, and they also work with Mick Gordon on almost all of these titles. And when Doom Eternal came out, they also released a soundtrack for the game alongside with it, which makes a lot of sense. It's a popular game. It's a really good composer. Let's release the full OST. But when the OST came out, there was initial concern with the low quality. This was posted on Twitter 2 days after the actual OST came out on April 16th, and it shows a side-by-side comparison between 2 soundtracks, one with a lot of depth in the waveforms, and another one that's very flat. And usually when it's flat, it means it cuts off a lot of the depth of the music and just removes it because it's peaking. It's like how happens when microphones peak and stuff. And it's a huge thread about how this is bad, and Mick Gordon is a talented audio engineer. How the hell does he not know how to do this? To which Mick replies, "Hey, I didn't mix those and wouldn't have done that. You'll be able to spot the tracks that I mixed because they sound good." That created a little bit of controversy because the lead at id Software and the lead of Doom Eternal, aka Marty, was like, well, I have to address this. And so 2 weeks later, made a giant Reddit post on r/Doom, an open letter that talked about why the OST is a bit lower quality. It goes into how Mick was assigned to do the OST, but ended up only being able to mix around 12 of the tracks, and how he had to hire another audio engineer named Chad to do the other 47 tracks. And we asked Mick time and time again to deliver on his deliverables in like a nice time frame, but Mick failed us. We tried to reach out, and he struggled to reach it back to us in a timely manner. We tried to give him as much time and money as possible, but he just wasn't doing it. And eventually we had to release it because we owed it to the people who paid for the soundtracks. And this whole post was met with a lot of admiration. A lot of people saying, "Hey man, disheartening but understandable. We love Mick. We love you guys. It's a bummer it didn't work out. Maybe work with these musicians in the future." Other posts that said, "Hey, it's a bummer that you guys aren't going to work together again," because I was in the post. I really like the music, but I understand Mick kind of dropped the ball. And that was the sentiment, is that Mick dropped the ball. Don't take my word for it, though. Take Link Stan's word, who said, "I would have gone silent after shoving my foot as far into my throat as you did here, dude. You done fucked up. Good luck getting work in the future, bro." So clearly some people were mad at Mick for failing to deliver on the OST. 3 years passed since that post, with almost everybody leaving, with a consensus that, well, Mick's silence is an admittance of truth, and he did not do a good job on delivering, even if he is a talented composer. Until this past week, where Mick released his own insanely deep and long Medium post. But before we jump into the Medium article, I have to tell you about today's sponsor, me, in my chess boxing event that's happening December 11th in sunny Los Angeles, California. You can buy tickets to see this event live right now, or maybe you just want to watch it online, but either way, do not miss out. It features 20 of the biggest creators in the world, all literally punching each other in the face and then playing chess until they knock each other out or win by checkmate. And big news! For the first time ever, this event will have multi-language support. So not only will it be broadcast on my channel in English, it'll also be broadcast in French and Spanish. I've worked really hard with the YouTube team to make this happen, so don't miss out. It'll be broadcast on youtube.com/@Ludwig. And if you're in the area, or perhaps you just want to go to a cool event, then check out the tickets right here. Come see me live. Come have fun and hang out. It'll be cool, and it's not run by Ticketmaster, so I guarantee it'll work. All right, back to the video. This is a 58-minute read, and it talks all about the inconsistencies, his side of the story, and it has a lot of receipts, so I would argue some of the truths of what actually happened all those years ago. And I'm going to do you a favor and just recap it. We'll just do a little recap. But I would recommend, honestly, taking a listen on your own. I listened to this on I had an hour car ride because I live in Los Angeles and that shit sucks. And my jaw dropped 7 different times. But I'll give you the spark notes. And I will echo Mick's sentiments here, which said the statement is not an excuse for a hate campaign. Acts of hate dish out online won't result in any positive change. Now, I say this a lot when I make posts about people, and it's something that I genuinely mean. It never fucking works. I found it never works to say, hey, please don't hate on this person. And then when you show them to be a bad person, people just want to hate on them. But it is important to take it seriously, because Mick talked about how when that original Reddit post came out that showed him in bad light and showed him to be someone who dropped the ball on a project, he got so much hate that it made life almost unbearable. It can be really crazy, so just hold off and just hate internally. Anyway, let's get to it. Let's talk about what actually happened. And like I said earlier, this is a lengthy post. So I'm going to glaze over a few of the big points that I took away after reading it, but you might want to read it yourself to take away some other points. So let's jump in. Doom Eternal was a difficult project. And in this, Mick talks about how he was reached out to very early in the project, 20 to 24 months before Doom Eternal was ever meant to release. And the entire contract was, hey, give us 2 songs a month that match up with some level, and then by the end of the 24 months, we'll have our full 48, 50 song soundtrack. That is the goal. And the music of Doom, if you don't know, has to match very closely to the level design. So if it's a platforming part, if it's a we are blowing up people's faces part, the music has to match that feeling. And unless there's some gameplay to go by, or at least some storyboard, it's not possible to create the music. So Mick for months was like, hey, can I get something? And he would get kind of dono-walled, because they just didn't have the things ready. So what do you do in that spot? Well, you're not going to not deliver on the contract. Mick kind of made things up as he imagined the game would be that wasn't created. And as you can imagine, when they started to make the game, they were like, oh, this song that you imagined up doesn't really match up to what we imagined up. We can't use it. You have to make something new. And that's very important to note at this point, that music contracts are based off of minutes owed. So for example, you might owe about 120 minutes, and the music was divvied up into different sections. So maybe you owe us 2 minutes of this space theme and 1 minute of this blowing up people theme, and then 30 seconds of this platforming part, but they can divvy it up how they see fit. And so Mick, because he was making up a lot of what he needed because they weren't giving him the assets, over the course of months, was creating a lot of minutes of work, but wasn't getting paid for the minutes of work because they didn't have the assets ready. But he was still working. In fact, he worked for 8 months straight without getting paid once. Eventually, he's like, hey, I need to get paid. And they're like, all right, fine, we'll pay you. But then after paying him the first time, they didn't pay him again for another 11 months. 11 months. Now, he goes in depth on how he actually needed the money, and it became very hard to work, and he was pulling all-nighters, sleeping under his desk, and just really wanted the cash for all the work that he was putting in for the game. Eventually, they cracked, but they called him difficult to work with along the way. You don't pay someone for 11 months and you call him difficult to work for? That's a little bold. That's a little bit bold. Anyway, it continues on, and he talks about how he was able to eventually get a lot of the soundtrack done, in part because they delayed the game from being released in November to the game being released, I think, like in March. And while the game was being developed, in the middle of it, there was a show, I think at like E3, and Marty at the show, Marty Stratton, he announces that Doom will release with an official soundtrack alongside it. So you can buy a deluxe edition that not only has the game, but it has an official soundtrack with all the sounds fully mastered from the game that you know and will probably end up loving. The only problem, Mick Gordon did not know about this. The guy who is literally making the music for the game did not know that they were going to be making a soundtrack and that he would have to provide the songs for said soundtrack. They announced that in like November, and that's when he found out about it. He did not get a contract to even do that part of the work until January. Now, if you are a layman like me, you might be thinking to yourself, well, can't you just pull the sounds from the game and just throw them in a soundtrack, call it a day? Not really. It doesn't really work like that. Like the way you have to master it for like, headphones if you're just listening to the music is a little different than I think if it's in the game mastered with other audio. And it's a totally different project. This is from Mick's mouth, which I believe because he's an expert on the subject, and I made one song with Porter Robinson. He doesn't even have a contract to do that part of the job. He is still not even done making the actual songs for the game at the point when they announce the soundtrack. So he says, hey, can we get a contract? Can we get a contract? Can we get a contract? He gets Donewald for 3 months. It's not until he emails somebody at Bethesda, a somewhat unrelated group on the project, and says, hey, Happy New Year. It's been 2-3 months now. Can I get a contract to do this? And very quickly, they get a contract going for him. And he is supposed to provide 12 songs for the official soundtrack that is going to release alongside the game. And then they are supposed to tell him which songs, but they don't. So he just picks 12 songs that he thinks are good and goes about making those songs. Now, they did tell him that the timeline to release the OST was very flexible. They came upon the date of April 16th, but they said that date could be pushed back if necessary, if you needed more time to work on it, right? And so he's like, all right, very cool. That feels good. And so he's working. And as he gets closer to the April 16th date, he's like, oh, maybe I need an extra day. And then Marty Stratton's like, nope, stop. No. Because they fucked up. They fucked up really bad. Now, there are consumer laws that I think are a little more protective in Europe than America, but they basically protect you. If you buy something, you are supposed to receive said thing. So when they announced that they were releasing a deluxe edition with the soundtrack and you could pay a deluxe amount of money for said thing, that product didn't exist yet. But that product needs to exist at some time that's reasonable within people paying for it, right? Because they're receiving the money for the thing that doesn't exist and there's no plan to make. As a consumer, you have rights. It's shocking, but it's true. And so they had to legally have this soundtrack out by April 20th, or they would probably have to return the money to every single consumer or get sued into oblivion. So that whole we can extend it, not really true. And this is just a little added insult to injury. And these are some of the tidbits that I'm leaving out that are so worth reading. 5 hours before he was supposed to deliver the soundtrack, Marty hits him up and he says, hey, I don't like the songs you picked to remaster. Can you pick new ones? 5 hours before. He had 4 months to say that. He did it 5 hours before. Holy shit. Finally, he's like, no, that's impossible. Marty's like, all right, fine, whatever. They release the soundtrack. But unbeknownst to Mick, they also had another audio engineer during this entire time working on the other 40 plus songs in the game that they were going to put in the soundtrack. And the problem was that those songs were super low quality. Now, he goes into the specifics here, but you can just see the waveforms, and it shows a lot of like cuts. Yeah, I'm not a nerd in the audio sphere, but you can see that it looks a little bit uglier than what maybe a waveform is supposed to look like. And these were made by Chad. No hate to Chad. It's not his job to do this, but he was assigned this task. And here's the extra fucked thing in my mind. He was assigned this task the year before Mick even had a contract to work on it. So Mick didn't even have the contract to create the OST. While he was waiting for that contract, they had another audio engineer working on mixing the sounds. And you can see that if you look in the files the same way you would when you look at like raw images of photos. He was working on this 4 months before Mick even knew he was supposed to do it. 2 months before he even knew there was going to be an OST. So clearly internally they were pushing a lot faster than they were with their communications with Mick. And throughout this whole process, the communications between Mick and Marty are terrible. It's a lot of messages and emails sent to Marty and no responses back to Mick. And a lot, I would say, of abusive language from Marty. Anyway, the soundtrack comes out and pretty quickly fans are like, oh, this is dog shit. I am sad that I paid for this. Mick's like, hey, I didn't make it. And then Marty makes the Reddit post like I showed you earlier. And then things get a little bit weird because Marty sees that post and he's like, well, that's a fucking lie. And not only did he see that post, he had talked to Marty literally the day before that post came out on a call about how they were going to make a joint statement to resolve the fans' concerns. Marty went behind his back. He said in the post, I had been manipulated. And then he has a detailed rebuttal to every single point Marty made in the Reddit post. But it's damning because it has a shit ton of receipts. And then he wanted to resolve it. He sent out basically his requests to id. And at this point, lawyers got involved. And his requests were very simple. Remove the Reddit post, pay me for the OST, because they weren't really paying him, and let me redo it so it sounds good. Because he wants, at the end of the day, for the OST to sound good. Because if it doesn't sound good, well, it reflects on him. He is the artist after all. His name is on every song. So if it sounds like shit, he's the one who will be blamed for it. And Marty says no. The only problem Marty had was removing the Reddit post. Even though he knew full well that the Reddit post was full of lies, Marty was against removing the Reddit post because he thought it would make him look bad. Yeah, that's how it fucking works. If you do something bad, it's gonna make you look bad. That's how life works. But sometimes you have to own your mistakes. This is the most mind-blowing fact of all to me. Mick Gordon went around Marty and he reached out to a Reddit moderator. And he talked about the entire situation, and he said, hey, this Reddit post has affected me deeply, professionally, and personally. Can you remove it? And the moderator did. They took it down. But within 12 hours, that Reddit post was reinstated. The moderator had blocked him on Discord and stopped replying to emails. And then a few days later, Marty's lawyers contacted him and said removing the Reddit post had greatly offended Marty. And he was furious in the strongest terms that an amicable resolution would be impossible now. He was mad that they removed the post that Marty knew was filled with lies because it hurt his reputation. And here's the kicker. Marty knows he's in the wrong. So this is the offer that they gave to Mick. We will give you $100,000 in exchange for never ever telling the truth and never ever talking about the Reddit post again. Basically, own that you are in the wrong, but take this sum of money and then remake the OST. And that was their offer. And Mick was like, no. I want this. I want this. He basically went through legal hell for the past 3 years, which is why he hasn't really talked about it. Which kind of adds up because Marty, over the past years, has talked about how he's wanted to redo the Doom Eternal OST, but hasn't gotten them to say yes. I mean, this is a tweet from over a year ago now. And it ends with no resolution. It ends with Mick just trying to get his side of the story out there. And Marty just trying to silence Mick the entire way and make sure that the truth is not out there, but the story that makes him look the best is. Now, there's a lot of details that I missed along the way here that, again, you can look through. Specific things like the audio engineer who mixed like the other 40 songs in the OST was credited as an artist on those songs, which is, kind of offensive when he had nothing to do with making them at all. And the only thing he did was slap them together in a way that wasn't very good. No offense to him. I mean, it's not his job. Well, it is his job to do that, but it's not like normally his job. That's not like what he's supposed to be doing. Honestly, it's a super fucked situation where Mick for 3 years has been abused by fans who thought he was a piece of shit. He lost out on work. And worst of all, he released work that he's not proud of as an artist that his name has to be attached to, and he has no way to do right by the fans. And it shows time and time again, he tried to do this by civil means because it's been 3 fucking years. Now, this post came out a little over a week ago, and of course, it's gotten a ton of attention, and people are fucking mad at Marty and id Software and again, Bethesda and even Microsoft. So much so that Bethesda released an announcement. The recent post by Mick Gordon both mischaracterized and misrepresented the team at id in the development of Doom Eternal, Marty Stratton, and Chad, the audio engineer, with a one-sided and unjust account of an irreparable professional relationship. Okay. To be fair, you could say the same exact things about Marty's original Reddit post, which was a one-sided and unjust account of an irreparable professional relationship, but okay. We are aware of all the details and the history and unequivocally support Marty and Chad and the team at id. We reject the distortion of the truth and the incomplete facts. We stand ready and with full and complete documented evidence to disclose an appropriate venue as needed. Basically, no, I think Mick is still wrong, and we are on Marty's side, which is bold, This is either written by Marty, or they better have a fucking truck full of receipts, because Mick Gordon's entire Medium post came with nothing but screenshots of emails. It came with nothing but contracts, conversations amongst lawyers, clips from the actual details of the songs. So we'll see. Unless they drop some major bomb in the coming month, I could not be more of a supporter of Mick Gordon. As someone who's never even played Doom in his life, I am fully Team Mick. And anyway, thought I would update on you all. A fucking long one. Hopefully this wasn't too much of a ramble and made a lot of sense, but I appreciate you all watching, and yeah, fucked up situation. So I'm supporting Mick and not hating on anyone else, but fucking damn, Mick deserves some support right now. All right, see you later. Thanks all for watching. Subscribe. All right, goodbye. Damn, this is crazy. Listen to the whole thing for sure though. All right, goodbye.